The Lord be with you. Reading from the Holy Gospel according to John.
Glory to you, Lord.
Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the tomb. So she ran and went to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one Jesus loved, and said to them, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we do not know where they have laid him." Then Peter and the other disciple set out and went towards the tomb. The two were running together, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. He bent down to look in and saw the linen wrappings lying there, but he did not go in. Then Simon Peter came following him and went into the tomb. He saw the linen wrappings lying there, and the cloth that had been on Jesus' head also lying with the linen wrappings, but rolled up in a place by itself. Then the other disciple who reached the tomb first also went in, and he saw and he believed. For as yet they did not understand the scripture that he must rise from the dead. Then the disciples returned to their homes. But Mary Magdalene stood weeping outside the tomb. As she wept, she bent over to look inside, and she saw two angels in white, sitting where the body of Jesus had been lying, one at the head and the other at the feet. They said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" She said to them, "They have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him." When she had said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not know that it was he. Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you looking for?" Supposing him to be the gardener, she said to him, "Sir, if you have carried away the body, tell me where you have laid him, and I will come and take him back." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned and said to him in Hebrew, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Jesus said to her, "Do not cling to me, because I have not yet ascended to the Father. But go to my brothers and sisters and say to them, I am ascending to my Father and to your Father, to my God and to your God." Mary of Magdala went and announced to the disciples, "I have seen the Lord." And she told them everything that he had said to her. The Gospel of the Lord. Namaste, my brothers and sisters. It's the fastest ball game in the world, easily. The ball is traveling on average about 100 miles an hour. It's a ball the size of about a baseball. And it may also be the oldest ball game in the world. The first record of it in Irish mythology goes back to the year 1287 BC, which would make it 37 years older than the exodus of the Israelites out of Egypt under Moses. And the very first game, allegedly, in Irish mythology was between two groups of fairies. The fairies from the province of Connacht and the fairies from the province of Munster. And it took place at a place called Máthirin in the year 1287 BC. It's a game we call, in my language, we call it Imóníocht, which is translated into Gaelic as hurling. And some of you have seen me play this. I have a few of the sticks in the back of my Jeep. But the game itself originally was played between two parishes. So all the menfolk and the boys of two parishes would come together somewhere between the two parishes, and there would be one ball, and each guy had a stick, and the object of the exercise was to drive the ball into the other parish, right into the village centre itself. So the game might last 8 or 9 hours, and there was tremendous shenanigans went on, I can tell you, in the course of that game. And at that stage, the guys are just dressed in long pants, and they're wearing caps, and most of them are smoking pipes, and it's a brutal game that goes on for hours and hours and hours. Well, in the year 1884, an organisation was started to try to regularise this. And in Gaelic it's called Cumann Luchlas Hoyle, which in English means the Gaelic Athletic Association. And it was set up in 1884 to try to put some schmack or some regulations into this crazy game. And so now it's a field sport. It's played on a field about 150 yards long by 80 yards wide, and it's played 15 players on each side. There's a goalkeeper, 6 backs, 2 centre field, and 6 forwards. And it's an extraordinary physical game. Now, people ask constantly, I wonder what the great players of today would be like if they had to play against the great players of the past. Go back even 50 years. You take one of the great teams from the early 1950s and compare it with the great teams of the year 2010. Who'd win? And there's this debate goes on in Ireland constantly. Who'd win? The old teams were greater or the new teams are greater? I have no doubt whatsoever that the guys of 2010 would utterly demolish the guys of 1950. And for the following reasons. Firstly, men are much bigger in Ireland at this stage because there's much better nutrition than there were even in the 1950s. And secondly, these guys who are playing today, they're extraordinarily disciplined. The old guys were smoking pipes when they played and wearing caps. These modern athletes, they don't smoke, they don't drink, they're very careful what they take into their bodies. They're training constantly, they're working out in the gyms, and they're being coached on specific skills. Moreover, the equipment is much better. The fields are in much better condition, and the guys are wearing cleats, and they're wearing shorts and shirts. They're not having baggy trousers and caps on them and pipes in their mouth. But most importantly of all, the rules of the game themselves have evolved, so that the rules are now rewarding skill rather than just brawn. So it used to be, for instance, when a ball was dropping into the goalkeeper, and this thing is traveling 100 miles an hour, is dropping into a goalkeeper, every one of the opposition team, all 15, could run in and flatten him and just run all over him. Now the goalkeeper is given a measure of protection. So the rules have changed so that you're rewarding skill, not just brawn. Now, I think the very same thing is happening in our universe. 13.7 billion years of evolution is throwing up some extraordinary species. There are species, obviously, in other parts of this universe that are much more evolved than us. But even on our little planet, there's an extraordinary evolution of the species on our planet. And so we've gone, in just literally the last 2 million years from Homo erectus to Homo habilis to Homo sapiens to Homo sapiens sapiens. And with the advent of the avatars, in the last 2,500 years, I believe we're coming to the age of what I call Homo spiritualis. People who are putting on Christ consciousness or Buddha nature, people who are moving to a whole new stage of what it means to be human in our planet. But not only are there more evolved species on our planet, like there are better hurlers in better condition than the guys in 1950, but the rules themselves are evolving. I am totally convinced that the rules governing the expansion of our universe haven't remained static for the last 13.7 billion years, but that literally the cosmic rules governing evolution are themselves evolving, that literally the rules themselves are evolving. And so when you find an avatar or a deep, deep mystic who seems to be working miracles, what's happening is these are people who understand the deeper reaches of cosmic law. They're reaching into the depths of cosmic law, which itself is evolving, and they know how to use the system itself. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. Avatars are miracle workers, are not people who are bending the cosmic laws. Our God is not indulging the prayers of holy people by changing the rules temporarily to accommodate their agenda. It's rather that these avatars and these mystics, they're people who understand what the cosmic laws are. And they're people who understand it at a depth that the most of us, including most scientists, still do not understand. And therefore they're able to utilize the inner reaches of these evolving laws themselves. So when we hear of miracle stories or resurrection stories, or you get stories in Tibet of the rainbow body, this is a phenomenon, well attested to, that there are some extraordinary lamas, really, really mystical men, who at the end of their lives can literally sit down in zazen position, in a meditation position, and change into a rainbow body. Their body literally disintegrates. The molecules of their matter get absorbed immediately into the ecosystem, and they release light. It's called the rainbow body. And so with those two caveats, that understanding of what miracles are, that miracles are not the bending of cosmic rules, they're the ability to understand the deeper reaches of how this universe of ours is constructed. And I keep using the word cosmos with a K, following the Greek tradition. Cosmos with a C is merely the physical universe in which we find ourselves. Cosmos with a K is both the physical universe in which we find ourselves and the metaphysical universe, which is the subtle blueprint for the physical one. The avatars are the people who can reach deep into the cosmic laws and know how to use them. And so they appear to be working miracles, but they're not miracles in the sense of contravening cosmic laws. They're miracles in the sense of utilizing and understanding much more fully how the universe in which we live, how it operates. And with that kind of an introduction and that kind of a caveat, I'm going to treat of the topic of resurrection today. And I'm going to just make 3 main points. I'm going to talk about bodily resurrection. What does that mean? And then I'm going to examine the Greek verb that's translated into English as to appear. And then thirdly, I'm going to talk about the lattice of Lightworkers and the iron horse. That'll be my third point today. So the first is the consideration of when we talk about Jesus rising bodily from the dead. What term are we using for body, or what's our understanding of body? Now, I have no doubt whatsoever that an avatar of the caliber of Jesus or the Buddha could totally manifest from the molecules of matter on the planet, could totally manifest a spacesuit for himself for a temporary mission. Totally possible. But much more likely, when we're talking about the resurrection of Jesus, we're talking about a different notion of body. So if the bodily resurrection of Jesus is literally that he reassembled the molecules of his matter and he walked out of the tomb, the same guy that had been carried in there 3 days before, then obviously heaven is a geographical location. If Jesus rose bodily in the sense of physical bodily from the tomb, and at the end of time, every one of us is going to rise bodily from the tomb and go to heaven, then heaven obviously has to be a geographical location. If we're going to have physical bodies, we need some kind of a geographical location for it. Moreover, we've got problems. Because on planet Earth, although there are gazillions and gazillions and gazillions of molecules of carbon and hydrogen and oxygen and nitrogen, it is a limited number. It is not an infinite number. It's a huge number, but it is a limited number. So there is nobody sitting inside in this church today, the molecules of whose physical spacesuit did not originally belong to countless other people who lived before you. There's not a single carbon molecule or oxygen or hydrogen or nitrogen molecule in your spacesuit today that didn't formerly belong to some other human being or some other life form on the planet. We have recycled these molecules endlessly. There's somebody sitting here with molecules in their body that once belonged to the carpenter from Nazareth. And there are people sitting here that once have molecules in their being that once belonged to Gautama Siddhartha, the Buddha. So we just keep recycling them. Now, if there is a resurrection on the last day, and if it is about reassembling our molecular structure, there's going to be problems. Real problems. Some guys are going to get up and say, hey man, you just stole my femur. No, those were my molecules first. What do you mean they were my molecules first? So who gets the molecules? The guy who first had them or the guy who last had them? So there's bedlam. If this is our understanding of bodily resurrection, then there's going to be absolute chaos and pandemonium on the last day. Moreover, the notion of Eucharist, when we come to Eucharist, that we're eating the body and drinking the blood of Jesus, then that is just mere cannibalism, if that's what we understand. That we're literally biting into the big toe or the kidney of Jesus of Nazareth. And so an understanding of body is very important. And unfortunately, we're stuck in the West with a model of body which is a kind of a WYSIWYG model. What you see is what you get. We think that the body is just this physical spacesuit. And of course it's not. All of the great wisdom traditions of the past have known that there are many different levels and understandings of body. So for instance, in ancient Egypt, they had a notion they called Ka. And Ka was the blueprint for the physical body. It was the etheric, energetic template which resulted in a physical spacesuit by absorbing particular kinds of nutrients from the environment. So it's fascinating to me that you and I are both absorbing the very same materials, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, but you're making you out of it, and I'm making me out of it. And a tree is making a tree out of it, and a dog is making a dog out of it. So we can't just be the physical molecules of our structure. We must be some kind of a blueprint, some kind of an information matrix that's taking stuff from the atmosphere and building you out of it rather than somebody else. There's a great Indian proverb that says, the same water that the cow drinks and turns into milk is the very water that the serpent drinks and turns into poison. And so there's some kind of a blueprint inside that's just taking physical stuff and building the meanness of the I am. And so there's body existing at very different levels. So the Egyptians would call that level Ka. The Persians a great civilization that created Zoroastrianism, would have a similar notion. The term they gave to it was Fravashi. And Fravashi was the same notion of an energetic template which gave birth to the physical spacesuit. And the Greeks divided into three parts. The Greeks had three terms for body. The first one was sarx, which was the physical body. The second one was soma, which was a kind of a psychic body. And the third was pneuma, which was a spirit body. And it's fascinating that when Paul talks about the resurrection of Jesus, which he does in his first letter to the Corinthians in chapter 15, he says very definitely, speaking of the resurrection of Jesus, sarx cannot inherit the kingdom of God. Sarx cannot inherit the kingdom of God. In other words, the physical spacesuit does not inherit the kingdom of God. He says what's sown in the ground and what comes out of the ground is very, very different. When you take a seed from an apple and you put it in the ground, it doesn't give birth to a seed. It doesn't even give birth to an apple. It gives birth to an apple tree. In other words, it gives birth to its own grandmother. Not its own mother, which would be an apple, but its own grandmother, which is an apple tree, which will give apples, which in turn will have seeds of their own. So what you put in the earth and what comes out are radically different. So the body that goes into the tomb and that what emerges are totally different, according to Paul. But as I said to you many, many times, the most interesting model of body that I've ever come across, more complex than the Egyptian one, or the Persian one, or the Greek one, is the Hindu model of body, which suggests that we exist at 7 different levels. There is indeed our physicality, our physical body, that they will call the gross body, and is vibrating between 400 and 700 nanometers, so it's between infrared and ultraviolet, we can see it. And that body dies and just gets recycled molecularly back into the ecosystem. But there's a second level of body that they call the etheric body, and is vibrating at a slightly higher frequency so that normally we can't see it, unless you have the ability to see auras, and that's what you're looking at. You're seeing the energetic template, the blueprint that created the physical body. It has the same relationship to the physical body that a blueprint from an architect's office has to your house. You want to build a house, you need firstly a blueprint. You take a blueprint and material and workers, and you turn this into that. So this physical body is the house that's built from the blueprint of the etheric body, according to the Hindu model. And when the physical body dies and gets recycled, the etheric body hangs around for a period of time, typically 3 or 4 days, and then itself gets recycled back into the universe as free energy. But there's a third level of body they call the astral body. And this is the body from which we download our emotions, and it's the body we inhabit at nighttime when we dream. When we travel astrally, we're traveling in the astral body. And moreover, on the death of the physical body, the belief system is that all of the experiences of that entire incarnation get downloaded onto the astral body. So you can reconnect with it on the way back in as you reincarnate sometime later. Above that, there's a mental body, which is the place of ratiocination and cognition and intuition and the ability to download great ideas. Above that is the causal body, which is the place at which we discover our psychic abilities. We discover that we are not separate from each other. We're actually all of us embedded in the same information field. And so we appear to be reading each other's minds. We appear to have knowledge of telepathy and psychokinesis and clairvoyance and clairaudience and clairsentience. But it's only because we're actually embedded in the same information field. I'm not reading your mind. I'm in the same information field as you. Whatever is available to you is available to me. And at that level of self, Hinduism would say, all of your experiences of all of the lifetimes and all of the incarnations you've ever lived, they're downloaded into that mega archive, and they're available to you as you come back down again. Above that is a 6th level, which is Atman, our individual soul, and beyond that is Brahma, our cosmic consciousness, our original source. And so when you think then about the resurrection of Jesus, here are the models you need to be working with. It is totally possible that an avatar like Jesus could literally assemble a bunch of molecules and create a spacesuit for himself. You've done it. Every one of you have done it. You've taken from an etheric template a bunch of molecules and you created you out of it. So it's quite possible he could have done that after his resurrection. But much more likely is that he invited the apostles to jump dimensions, to shift states of consciousness, which brings me to my second point. The word that's used in the New Testament is written in Greek, of the appearances of Jesus, the verb that's translated as to appear. The Greek original has the sense not that he appeared such that if he appears down in that corner and everybody's looking at that corner, everybody sees him. That's not the sense of the Greek verb to appear. The Greek sense of the verb to appear is he chose to make himself visible to. So in other words, it's not a tape recordable or a videotape recordable event. It is that the entity who chooses to be in communication with or to have an encounter with chooses the modality and invites those who are able to step across the threshold through the portal into a different dimension to have some kind of an encounter with it. And so 6 years after he dies and goes back to the Father, Paul has a vision of Jesus. So somehow Paul has managed to breach the veil, and Jesus has chosen to make himself apparent to him. It's the very same Greek verb that's used in Matthew's Gospel in chapter 17, where Jesus takes Peter and James and John, and they go up to the top of the mountain, and he has a vision. And the vision is so powerful that the other three actually get to participate in it. And he has a vision where he's talking to Moses and Elijah. Now, Moses would have been dead 1,250 years before Jesus, and Elijah would have been dead about 800 years before Jesus. But somehow, they've pierced the veil. They've jumped dimensions. They've found the portal, and all four of them, Jesus, Peter, James, and John, see through to the other side. So this is not a verb such that everybody looking at the specified location is going to make visual contact with whatever is there. I remember one time hearing a story about a famous Indian yogi. And American tourists were visiting in India, and they see this yogi, and he's sitting in a lotus position, and there's a coiled rope beside him, and there's a little boy sitting beside the coiled rope. And the yogi takes out his flute and begins playing the flute. And you've seen this. The rope begins to uncoil itself and to stretch into the heavens as the visitors are watching, and the little boy comes out and starts climbing up the rope and disappears at the top of the rope. And the American visitors are totally awestruck. They can barely believe what their eyes have just seen. And so they're delighted they've had the opportunity. They go back home, and years and years and years later, one of them comes back, and he's visiting, and the yogi is sitting there again with the coiled rope and the little boy, and this time the American has a video cam with him. And so the yogi takes out his flute and begins playing his flute, and the American is videotaping the whole thing. And right there, the coiled rope begins to uncoil itself and stretch itself into the heavens. And the little boy comes and climbs to the top. And the American is delighted. Now he's got footage of it. And he goes back to his hotel room and he plays the video. And there's nothing on the video. The rope never moved and the little boy never moved. And he is really, really upset. He realizes this guy has scammed him. But here's the question. Was he scammed? Are you going to believe the evidence of a video recorder or an experience you've had yourself? Video recorders can't have mystical experiences. They're not manufactured to have mystical experiences. They're created in order to make visual contact in a sensory modality with a physical object. What this yogi was doing was, he was climbing inside the mind of this visitor, and he was taking him on an excursion through the dimensions into a parallel universe where what he was seeing with his eyes was the deeper reality, not what he was seeing or not seeing with his video cam. Now, this is the sense in which the verb is being used. It is not about everybody, if I say, oh my God, there he is, and everybody looks over there, we all get to see him. It is the ability to shift states of consciousness. It is the ability to move through a portal. It is the ability to jump dimensions. And then you have encounters with far deeper levels of reality than are formerly true. So how then do we know if resurrection is true? I've said to you many times that I have a very different definition of truth. For me, something is true if it transforms me and aligns me with God. Then it's true. Truth for me is not the correspondence between sensory data and my mental maps. That is not truth. That's just knowledge and map making. Something is really true if it transforms me and aligns me with source. And something is ultimate truth if it transforms me radically and aligns me permanently with source. So how do we know that resurrection was true? Because the people who had the encounters are radically and permanently transformed. It is the single most important experience of their lives, and it translates into altered lives and altered traits. That is the hallmark of truth. Not that it corresponds to some kind of data in the sensory world. And so the verb appear is very, very different. It's the ability to move through the portals, to shift dimensions, and to engage with levels of reality which are far more important than just this physical mode of ours. Which brings me to my third point. I call it the Lattice of Lightworkers and the Iron Horse. There is a beautiful teaching in the Talmud about the Lamed Vav It's a belief system that at any stage of human history, there are 36 tzaddikim, or enlightened beings on planet Earth. And according to the Talmud, these people may not know of the other people's existence. They know they're on the planet perhaps, they know there are 36 on the planet, they may not be aware that they themselves are one of them, or they have no idea who the others are. But they act as a kind of a conduit. Without their presence, literally, physical reality would just implode and dissolve and disintegrate. So they're holding reality in being on behalf of Hashem, of God, in some way. Now, I think this is a beautiful, beautiful teaching. I only disagree with one part of it, and that is the number 36. I told you years and years ago, I had a very powerful vision. And in this vision, I saw an image of planet Earth. And the planet itself was surrounded by a grid of light. And it was like where every line of longitude and line of latitude met, there was a being of light stationed. So it was like every part where a longitude and latitude met, on that part there was a being of light. And one at the North Pole and one at the South Pole. So it's like the entire globe was embraced in this lattice of light workers. And when the vision was completed, I went and I calculated how many light beings that would be. And it's 64,442. So that is my belief system, that in our times, that the evolution is such that we're surrounded by extraordinary light beings who are acting as a kind of a grid, as a spirit grid for the world to make the transformation into the next stage of human evolution, to move into Christ consciousness or Buddha nature or Krishna mind, whatever term you want to give to it. So I want to use a totally different metaphor. I'm thinking of the train system as it moved across this continent in the 1700s or the 1800s at least, when the iron horse was invented. And it's moving across the country. I want you to imagine that it's reached maybe someplace in Montana, and they're trying to push further and further west. And as this train chugs, it's carrying all of the tools and all of the equipment and all of the workers who are going to extend the lines. So as it comes to the end of the railway, they're going to offload the gravel that they're going to put down in front, and they're going to offload the lumber that they're putting across it, and they're going to offload the steel beams that are going to run across it, and the nails, whatever they need. So they're going to offload all the materials. And moreover, the workers and the foremen are going to come out, and they're going to build it. And as they build it further, the next train that comes can go further. And it's bringing the equipment and the material and the workers to move it further and further along. Now, the train for me is spirit. And the evolution is the evolution in our times and for our planet of the Christ consciousness or the Buddha nature. And the drivers of the train are the avatars who have come among us to push this project forward. And the material that the train is carrying, these are the practices that we need to put in place. The infrastructures, different economic models, different kind of political thinking, different notions of religion, different kinds of spiritual practices that will allow us to lay down the lines on which the train is subsequently going to move. And who are the foremen? The foremen of this project are maybe the mystics who are coming to guide us, and the worker force is the rest of us, the guys who are actually laying down the track. And the whole object of the exercise is to drive the iron horse further and further and further into the west. If resurrection means anything, much more importantly than that an extraordinary avatar may have assembled a group of molecules and built himself a temporary spacesuit in order to encounter the apostles whom he left behind, much more importantly, resurrection is an invitation to our time and to our planet to continue laying down the tracks for the railroad of evolution into Christ consciousness.